Ah, 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 Hit it, Fergie. Oh my God. All right, everyone. So, I am so scatterbrained right now that I don't even know what we're talking about. Is this you season 4, part 1, title confusing as fuck? All right, give me 2 seconds, everybody. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. I am ill prepared right now. I apologize for all my new viewers. I'm a little bit flabbergasted just because, first of all, why is Netflix going to do us like this? Why are you going to do us like uh, part 1, part 2? Well, I'll tell you why you want to have part 1, part 2 for most reasons would be the talkability, the memeability, the pinch bagability of it. It's basically the week to week format is something that Netflix has been trying to fight against for a very long time, for I don't know how long now, but years at this point. So the the thing for me after watching this first part 1 of you. Now let me get this straight of how many episodes this was. I think it was about 5 or 6 episodes. So yeah, 5 episodes. Um I do have some problems. I got some issues, and a lot of it is going to come down to the format of this second season. What the fuck am I talking about? Fourth season. People are like, oh my Jesus. So, first of all, thank you to all the new subscribers, all the new viewers that we have on Look It All Podcast. Whether you're on SoundCloud, Spotify, we're on Spotify now, Apple iTunes, your favorite provider, YouTube, Twitch, whatever you need, we're on all these, and links are provided in the description as well. Appreciate everyone that is supporting the Look It All podcast. I'll make sure I'm recording. Everything's all good. Yep. Okay, good. Um, so, in the time that we have recorded, my head feels like it's like 5 times the size. Mostly because I've watched You Part 1 of Season 4 and Murtaugh documentaries, HBO Max, the Netflix. I saw Ant-Man, Wasp, Quantumania. Uh, Too much stuff to podcast. F is for Family season 5. I've watched all this shit. My head's literally about to blow, so I need to get this shit out of my system. So be sure to check all that. We have patreon.com/podcast as well as everything else. So, yeah, you want to hear about You season 4, part 1, episodes 1 through 5. Spoilers. Now we have, at this point, part 2 is not released, and it won't be released until March 9th. So, what's going on with old Joe in the first season? So we've already talked about the first episode. Go back and check out that episode on the Look It Out podcast, right on just a few below. So we're going to go ahead and jump to episode 5 and give you the full plot of what happens. Just spoilers through the 5th episode. We have not seen anything else at this point because it's not released. So once we go through this, we will discuss the things we did like, the things we didn't like about this season. Episode 5 of season 4. Kate insists she did not kill Gemma. By the way, this is episode The Fox and the Hound. Kate insists she did not kill Gemma. Joe comes to believe her and helps her dispose of the body in a barn while others are partying. Kate confronts Joe about his past after noticing his apparent experience with covering up murders. Joe admits that he disposed of Malcolm's body, and whomever framed him is now trying to frame Kate. Kate goes to tell Phoebe to dismiss the servant staff. While she is away, Rold discovers Joe is in the barn and brings him to the others, accusing him of being the killer. Despite Joe's protests, Rold gives him a head start to flee before pursuing him with a shotgun. Joe subdues Rold in the woods while only to be captured and placed in a dungeon by the real killer. Reyes, who, having come from poverty, committed the murders out of resentment towards the rich. Reyes tells Joe to kill Rold so they can frame him for the murders. When Joe refuses, Reyes sets the dungeon on fire and leaves Joe. Sorry, and leaves. Joe escapes and frees Rold, and the two are rescued by Kate. Joe does not tell the others about Reyes and vows to bring him down. Vows to bring him down himself. Reyes announces candidacy for mayor of London. Okay, so off the top of my head, without having my notes in front of me, I don't know why I didn't bring my notes. Sorry about that. This season is taking a different approach from the other seasons. It's not the horror stalker killer story that we've been following for the last couple of seasons. As we discussed in the previous seasons, at the end of season 3, let's just kind of recap. Basically, he has to kill, or he does kill his wife, who was trying to kill him and a couple other people in the basement. And I thought there was a lot of juice on the bone for that story. The love story of, and he also had to give up his kid. And I got to say, the repercussions of the last 3 seasons feel like they're inept to this 4th season. Now, I know the whole premise of this 4th season is we got a murder mystery on our hands. We got the Knives Outification, the White Lotusification, the Minusification. We got the all these murder, Glass Onionification. Everything's a murder mystery these days. So if everything's a murder mystery, nothing's a murder mystery. It's like, all right, you got to be really, really good. To kind of follow that. Death on the Nile last year. I mean, there was so many murder mysteries off the top of my head. I can't even think of them all. And now we got You season 4. And I'm sure that they were watching all these other ones saying, oh, we got that Agatha Christie in the bag. I was like, y'all a little bit late to the party. This You season 4 feels a little bit like we're being held at arm's length. We are kind of jogging in pace. We're in the tropes of, all right, we've exhausted everything we can do with this character in America, so we have to literally push him. We're taking a Euro trip. When a lot of properties go on Euro trips, or they go overseas, or the vacation, it's because they've exhausted the other storylines in the previous seasons. They've had the baby. Oh, someone's pregnant. Oh, this happens. Oh, that happened. There was so much meat on the bone for the first 3 seasons. It almost feels a little bit like diminishing returns. And the more I'm hearing about Penn Badgley going behind the scenes, and he's much more spoken about not wanting to be so much of a like a sexual object, and I totally understand that. I'm not. I'm like 3 times the size of Penn Badgley, so I'm sure I wouldn't want to be up there like shaking bacon up there too. So what I heard was he didn't want to have too many intimacy scenes, if any. I think it was between season 1 and 3 that he got married. So, naturally, him and his spouse are just like, maybe can you not do that as much? So I understand that. I can totally understand that. Now, with saying that, from a viewer standpoint, you want to be super respectful of the actor having to perform all of these acts on, film for millions and millions of people. And then, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into that. But with saying that, I could feel it. I I've slowly seen it over the course of about 5 years, which is great that they have these sexual coordinators on set. Sexual, it's not like sexual intercourse coordinators, but it's like intimacy coordinators that are making sure that both parties are comfortable with the scenes and everything, which I absolutely am 100% for. We should have had that the whole time. But with saying that, you're playing, it's so different because I'm not, obviously, I'm not the one doing it. But from the viewer standpoint, it's like it would, we're not watching 50 Shades of Grey, but there is a level of intimacy and attraction that the viewer is having towards the acts that they're doing in the first couple seasons. And then they're saying, and the viewer is returning back for multiple seasons because they like the feeling of watching something a little risque of some sort. And then we go to by season 4, and he's like, I'm not doing that anymore. And we're kind of watching it, and then we're like, this feels awfully tame. There's nothing, and he's not going to do the same thing he did in season 1, but we're we're not scaling back the sexuality. Like, sexuality is interesting to watch over the course of film, because obviously if you do the same thing you did in season 1, it's not going to be as interesting in season 4. You've seen it 3 or 4 times. It's like some same person coming to the party, and, oh, what did you think they brought? They brought chips. Add the chips to the next. We got more chips over here, guys. Don't worry, we got plenty of chips. We got 4 seasons of chips. Like, I understand that you want to bring a diversification to the party. You want to bring a diversification of changing up the murder mystery. This season feels, especially because part 1 feels like I'm at arm's length. Like, so many things feel yada yada in a way. He's somehow, Joe is all of a sudden, he's got the different name. He's got new friends. We got a brand new world we have to be introduced to. And I initially liked it at first, but I felt like the compelling parts of this were not necessarily even Joe. And I felt like the predictability. I was like, okay, so, this episode we're going to learn about this person. This episode we're going to learn about this person. This episode we're going to learn about this person. And then ultimately at the end, where it's going to be some sort of twist or reveal, because that's how the murder mystery format normally goes for television. If it was a movie, it'd be a little bit more condensed. I think this actually would have been better as a movie because it almost feels too stretched out. It almost didn't need to be 10 episodes. And what I'm hearing is, through the grapevine, a lot of people are not crazy about this part 1, part 2 stuff. Now, as a podcaster, I'm kind of like in between it. I do like the week to week format so that we can engage and have conversations with everybody about, who might be the killer, who may not be the killer. So, um, overall, this format is suffering from, in a condensed format, is the part 1, part 2 of it. Most murder mysteries are not divided in half like this. There's might be some wonky hanky panky psychedelic nature happening between Joe and Reese. I'll touch on that a little bit in the predictions here in a little bit. So I feel like the audience is not being told a whole lot. Like, there's a whole lot of like Joe just like waking up from out of a blank state or whatever, and like, oh my gosh, oh god, I got the name, I got the blood. Like, there's so much of it that I feel like we're being held at arm's length, and almost none of the episodes I felt that surprised by. I think in the first episode I had called that Reese was weird, that whoever's doing this murder mystery is probably not alone. Like, after seeing that, I feel like my head has exploded with all these murder mysteries in the last like year and a half since Knives Out. I was kind of call it the White Lotusification of it, but it's way more of Knives Out, because I think it started a little bit further back there, and obviously Agatha Christie started the whole thing. Which post show recaps mentioned that Agatha Christie novels, she had apparently made like over 70 murder mysteries, and she's got like number 3 most sold art writer in the history of ever, or something like that. Is that true? I don't have the facts up here, but that is phenomenal if it's true. I mean, my lord, making bank. So, people love their murder mysteries, but with saying that, it's like, how many can you do without starting to say, it's probably the doorman who said 2 things, and then, blah, yada yada. My whole thing is, we're going to start to get into predictions. So if you don't want to hear any predictions, hop into the next podcast, or, thank you for listening, watching, look at our podcast, do all that stuff. But I've heard predictions through the grapevine that kind of feel like it makes a little bit more sense. My whole thing about this season is the cast, is great as usual. The suspects are they're playing their roles, but the thing is nothing has been super surprising. Uh, there's always the red herring, the the guy that's jealous, the maybe a lady that's I mean, there's actual tropes from the Knives Out formula that I feel like are reflected in this. The Tony Collette character is one of is almost like identical to one of the preppy characters in this season as well. I think it's Phoebe's. Um, and then there's the asshole who's uh let me think. The asshole who is the Chris Evans character in Knives Out. Like they almost have specific personality traits they like to use in murder mysteries that kind of correlate to each one of them. It's like, oh, you've got the pretty one, but she's definitely sus. You've got the nice guy, but he's definitely big sus. Um, so let me just talk about the big thing that I heard that might be happening um, in this the season. So I'm hearing that Reese and if you don't want to hear any possible spoilers, I don't think this is a spoiler, but it might be very well what happens in the season. Um, go ahead and pause now and come back. Reese, I'm hearing that Reese might be Joe. Now, I'd need to go back and watch season 4 at the beginning to see if Reese has many interactions with Joe and the rest of the cast. But I think it's just Reese and Joe for the majority of it. Although there is a funeral scene where Reese is with the rest of the cast. I need to go back and see if they've actually had, you know, uh, if they've all been in a room converging and connecting at the one time. But if Reese is Joe, this reveal would have been very good to have at the beginning of this part, not part two. If you reveal at the beginning of part two, let's just say episode 6, the next episode, that Reese is Joe, it's like, oh, and then it's like, all right, let me just binge the rest of the season and I'll be done with it. As opposed to if you told us Reese was Joe in episode 5, we would have like a month to talk about it. It would be February 9th to March 9th. Uh, we would just be like, holy Santa Claus shit. Can you believe that Reese was Joe that whole time ago? And then we have the time to go back and look at all the things. But I don't think there's any correlation or we have the disappearing text messages that are going to Joe. The biggest clue that I think makes it look like Reese might be Joe. So there's okay. So the biggest reason that I think he might be Joe, and then the biggest reason why he might not be Joe. So the biggest reason I think he might be Joe is because most text messages are not when you get text messages on TV or movies or media, normally we don't get it visually written on screen and in a voiceover in our head. It seems for me, I think it's kind of weird that they've chosen to do the visual language, like we're seeing the text message on the screen and Joe is reading it as well. But because we don't know who it's coming from, I guess that makes a little bit more sense. Now, the reason I don't think he's Reese um, would be he's running for office or something like that, mayor of London. There's no way that Joe could do that without getting possibly caught because the entire premise of this first season is Joe is being framed in a way for or Joe is being framed for Malcolm's death, but on the other hand, he still has all these other deaths, love, and all that other shit he has to deal with from his previous life, which kind of feels like it's just kind of dangling over his head, but not necessarily that it's taken. It's more of like it's not the MacGuffin, but it's definitely the driving force for why it's happening, but not why each episode's happening. Each episode seems to be more just like, all right, I need to go check on this guy. I need to go see why this guy's acting weird. I need to go see why the guy from White Lotus is getting some weird freaky shit going on in that room. And it feels very contained in a way that I didn't I like if Knives Out had happened over the course of 10 hours, I'm not sure if it would have been as successful. So I think that is kind of what it is. In what's it? Reese having this obsession with Joe, Joe going back to his place and seeing all of this, shit on his walls and stuff like that. I believe, and I really think that the student has something to do with it at the beginning. Like, I really think it's probably going to be a combination of of oh, let's talk about Marianne too. Of his student, I don't have his student's name. Mm, I don't have her name, anyways. Anyways, we'll continue. I think it might be his student have something to do with it because she's kind of very oh, Nadia, played by Amy Lee Hickman. Um, she's very sus, still very sus. And I think I had called the Reese in the first episode, but I'm not 100% sure. Um, anyways, you know, several of the people that Joe thinks are suspects dies, and I think that's another trope in murder mysteries as well. The problem with this murder mystery is it doesn't seem to be subverting too many tropes, and on top of it, it's not very um, compelling. Is not a word I would use. I'd say just breezily entertaining is how I would kind of categorize this um, season, and with a skepticism of thinking that we're about to run its course. Like, if we get 6 seasons of You, it's like done. There's no way it can get. I don't think we're going to come back from the first 3 seasons. It's just going to get less and less return. Um, anything else I did like about? I feel like I've been kind of harsh about this season. I like all of the casting. I think is really great. I think it's I forget how funny the show can be. I like Reese as a character. I kind of wish he wasn't the big bad. I wanted him to kind of be a little bit more interesting than he was. But the problem with him is they've kind of kept him at such an arm's length that I don't even know what his motivation feels weird to eat the rich. It's very just like tell and don't show, in my opinion. And yeah, I ultimately ultimately I find it kind of predictable, like I said with the tropes, only because we've seen a lot of this before. But yeah, I did really like the like Downton Abbey type setting. I thought that was kind of a interesting change of pace. Joe's beard is fucking phenomenal. Oh my god, can I do that? Can you Pin Badger? You gotta let me know what kind of biotin you taking. Because my god, um, yeah, the dude's handsome, and let's see, yeah. So overall, let me just kind of uh, you know, pan this out. Overall, I think this season is a little bit worn out, mostly because we've seen this format a lot of times. Um, the tropes we've seen in other murder mysteries are happening here again. We do have a very compelling Penn Badgley, but he can only do so much with this, and I feel like he's having to always reintroduce us to a new cast of characters, which I liked the correlation of uh, him knowing people from season to season. I feel like he's very closed off from the previous seasons. Like, if you told somebody to kind of watch this without watching the first 3 seasons, I think a lot of people would be able to be like, oh wow, this is pretty interesting. Now, the one thing that I do feel like was kind of like a dropped thread in a way was well, two things. One, that I feels like that Joe is trying to fight the urge to be a killer anymore. He doesn't want to do this. Like, the people he's had to kill in this or had to take down were because they attacked him first, kind of thing, with the exception of Marianne. um Marion is such a weird plot thread in this season that I'm not really sure how to address it. But uh, he's like obsessed with Marion at the beginning of the season, and basically scares the fuck out of her in an alleyway while like trying to disarm her with while she has a knife on him. Like, dude, get the fuck out of here, man. You are 110% in the wrong here. Like, dude, you were on some next level on that one. You didn't need to go that far. So it feels like he just scares the shit out of Marianne so that they can get her out of the plot. But she also knows that he's alive. Like, there's only so many people, I guess, that know that Joe is currently alive, because at the end of season 3 there was a big fire that's supposed to look like he was cooked into a pie or something like that, and his son is given to those two guys at the end of season 3, and his wife was possibly there's word through the grapevine love might be back. And if love is back, that would be pretty crazy. I think it would be kind of bullshit, but it would also be kind of crazy, because I feel like if they bring love back. Now my biggest question is, all right, so if they bring, I don't want her to come back as a ghost. If she comes back as a ghost, only do it once. I hate like someone visualizing a fake person there and them giving them advice and stuff like that. I'm just not crazy about that storytelling. Seems kind of lazy. Like, how would you know what they were ever going to say? This is all just like a figment of your mind. So um, I don't really want it to be ghost love. I would want it to be the real love, and I want her to kind of be getting revenge. And if it's a combination of like Reese and Love doing something, that'd be kind of interesting. Um, but Love does feel like big end game material, and Joe, in my opinion, Joe does not belong on this earth. After all the shit he's done, he has sealed his deal. I'm just kind of like, Joe, Jowdy, you know? So my that's kind of my thinking in that. Um and let me kind of look at this episode 1 real quick, just to kind of see what Reese was doing in there. Okay, so in the present, this is episode 1 of season 4. I'm just seeing what Reese again was doing. Okay, in the present, Joe lives in his new identity, Jonathan Moore. He doesn't look like a Jonathan. A university English professor. I hear in Oxford. I don't know how he did that. He develops an interest in Kate Gavin, the girlfriend of his obnoxious fellow professor Malcolm Harding, who lives in the flat across from him. Joe saves Kate. 2 muggers repay him. Okay, I forgot the 2 muggers. Like, we're trying to, like, at the beginning, we're definitely trying to soften Joe. Malcolm invites him to the party at the Elite Sundry House, where, okay, so yeah, Malcolm invites him in, and Joe befriends an author, Mayor Hopeful. So Reese is supposed to be at that party at the beginning. I just don't remember him interacting with too many people. Joe gets heavily intoxicated at the party and Alex awakens in his flat to find Malcolm stabbed to death, missing a finger, assuming his missing a finger I thought was kind of weird, but I guess that's just like MacGuffin to find the MacGuffin. Assuming he killed Malcolm before blacking out, Joe disposes of the body, and then next day Kate invites Joe over to dinner. I will say Kate is oddly, I feel like she didn't give a shit about Malcolm the whole time. I know she's kind of like, yeah, yada yada, but she's like straight up emotionless. Like, did you do it, girl? Um, and then we see, later in the seasons, like, makes it look like what's her face is killed. As Joe arrives, he receives a series of anonymous texts from Malcolm's real killer, thanking him for disposing of the evidence. Like, if that is Joe, it just seems weird, and apparently he's being followed through all this as well. Yeah, I just don't. It appears that Reese is a real person, and I also think that he's working with someone else. There's no way it's just one, especially because, well, I don't know. There's a lot to kind of unfold. Let me know what you thought about the review. Let me know what you thought about You season 1 part 1. So what the hell? You season 4 part 1 episodes 1 through 5. Holy Santa Claus, that is long. So yeah, let me know what you thought about that, the review, everything else in between. Let me know what you think what are your predictions for you coming up? And yeah, we'll bust it from there. And be sure to check out the rest of the Look It All podcast. We have tons of reviews going down the pipe. We have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Knock at the Cabin. We just talked about You season 4, You season 3's finale, The Last of Us. We're talking about Velma, HBO Max. That's on patreon.com/Let It All podcast. We have Escape Plan 2, that to Hades or whatever the fuck that was, with Dave Bautista and Sylvester Stallone. That's available on Patreon right now. We have tons of exclusives on Patreon. You can get the full review on there as well. Be sure to check out lookitoutpodcast.com for all of the links, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the Instagram, the Twitters, everything, how to support. You can find it there. Again, we have exclusives and longer formats of the review on patreon.com/lookitoutpodcast. You can get your favorite reviews on your favorite shows there. And yeah, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, watch on all of the favorite platforms. You can go on Apple, iTunes, Spotify. You know what to do. Look at all I don't know what I'm talking like that. Look at all podcast. Take it easy. And we'll be back for You season 4 finale. Take it easy.